It's 231 BC, and the first thing you feel is the stiffness in your back. Your stomach complains before you even stand. Hunger is a normal part of life in Athens now, something you manage rather than escape. Outside, the city is already waking. You hear merchants moving their carts, neighbors calling out greetings, and somewhere, far off, the bark of a stray dog. Wood smoke drifts through the narrow streets, mixing with the harsher smells of a crowded city that hasn't changed its habits in centuries. As you start toward the agora, you pass buildings of sun-dried brick and weathered marble, reminders of better days. Your elders still speak of them, the time when these streets saw Socrates and Plato, when Athens guided the world instead of simply surviving it. Now, the great powers lie elsewhere, and rumors say another one is rising far to the west. The buildings around you, sun-baked brick, battered marble, seem to murmur with age. They've watched empires rise, burn, and fade to dust. And as you head toward the agora, not just for food, but for news and rumors, you can't help thinking of the stories the elders always whisper, tales of when Athens mattered, when Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle walked these same streets, when the Parthenon gleamed white and new instead of cracked and tired. As you reach the agora, the marketplace is already a living organism, pulsing with activity. Merchants hawk their wares in booming voices, a cacophony of commerce. Citizens argue heatedly over politics, their words layering over each other in a chaotic yet comforting din. Slaves, their faces impassive, move with practiced efficiency, bearing burdens for their masters. You navigate the throng, your eyes adjusting slowly to the dazzling light that spills across the bustling square. You approach a fruit seller, his weathered hands arranging piles of plump figs, and exchange a few small drachmas for a handful of figs and olives. You pop a salty olive into your mouth, the briny burst of flavor momentarily quieting your grumbling stomach, and, perhaps, your worries. Any news from the north? You ask the merchant, whose breath, rich with garlic from his morning meal, washes over you as he leans closer. He's always the first to hear the latest gossip, a walking chronicle of the city's pulse. They say the Illyrians are causing trouble again. Raids on Greek merchant ships. Bad for business. Very bad. You nod, your thoughts drifting. Illyria, that rugged region across the Adriatic, has always been a nest of pirates. But that's a distant problem, isn't it? A nuisance for merchants, certainly, but hardly something that would disrupt your own rhythm of life here in Athens. Isn't that just like history, though? Small ripples, far from shore, can become tidal waves. Indeed, those Illyrians, under their ambitious queen Tuta, have been growing bolder. Their swift, nimble ships now target not only Greek vessels, but also those of Italian merchants, the traders from Rome. And Rome, unlike your fragmented Greek city-states, possesses a formidable unity. They do not tolerate threats to their commercial interests. In the Roman Senate, hot debates erupt. The Republic, still recovering from its exhausting victory over Carthage in the First Punic War, sees a new threat. Many influential senators, their voices echoing in the forum, demand swift, decisive action against these pirate kings and queens. But you, lost in the immediate concerns of daily life, know nothing of these distant senatorial arguments. You finish your simple breakfast and make your way to the small workshop where you earn your living, your hands calloused and strong from years of shaping metal. Find comfort in the familiar heft of your tools. Today, you are crafting a bronze lamp. carefully hammering the soft alloy into an elegant curve, a commission for a wealthy patron. The workshop is small, its walls of rough-hewn stone, hinting at generations of artisans, but it is well lit by the Mediterranean sun streaming through the open doorway. The rhythmic asterisk tink-tink-tink asterisk of your hammer on metal fills the space, a soothing counterpoint to the city's roar, occasionally punctuated by the hiss and sizzle of hot bronze being quenched in a bucket of cool water. Your muscles warm with the effort, and you fall into the ancient, comforting pattern of work, a rhythm that keeps you human even amidst a world teetering on the brink. As the day wears on, a sudden clamor erupts from the street outside, pulling you from your focused craft. You step out, wiping a streak of soot from your brow, to see a crowd gathering around a man, clearly a traveling merchant, his garments travel-worn, his face flushed with either anger or exhilaration. The Romans have sent an embassy to Queen Tuta, he proclaims, his voice cutting through the market hum. They demand she cease the piracy or face consequences. A ripple of laughter, dismissive and sharp, sweeps through the onlookers. What consequences? Someone scoffs. What can Rome truly do, all the way across the sea? The merchant shakes his head, a grin set to his jaw. Don't underestimate them. I've been to Italy, these Romans, ... They're not like us. They are organized, they are disciplined, and they hold grudges. You listen with mild interest, but the affairs of distant kingdoms and republics, honestly, seem so far removed from your daily struggle to earn enough drachmas to feed yourself. With a shrug, a small, practical gesture that belies the enormity of the news, you return to your workshop, the future of the Mediterranean world temporarily eclipsed by the immediate concerns of your commission. History isn't written in stone. It's written in footsteps like yours, in the quiet, mundane choices that unwittingly set the stage for grand events. Months pass, the seasons change, and the hot, the dry, clinging heat of summer finally relented, giving way to the milder, more forgiving days of autumn. A welcome coolness permeated the air, carrying the faint, sweet scent of drying leaves and distant hearth fires. You continued your familiar rhythm, the long hours of work that kept your muscles taut and your mind occupied. The occasional restorative visits to the public baths, where the steamy air always seemed to loosen the day's burdens, and the evenings, the evenings, spent in the warm, convivial chatter with friends at your favorite local tavern. Life, as it always does, simply went on, a steady, predictable current. But then, one crisp morning, a ripple note, a shockwave of news reached Athens, a jolt that threatened to disrupt even the most settled routines. Imagine the sudden hush that falls, the way a communal breath is held, as word spreads like wildfire through the market stalls and along the dusty streets. One of Rome's envoys, sent to distant Iria, had been killed, and the whispers, laced with disbelief, suggested it might have been on the direct orders of Queen Tut herself. But that, you'd soon discover, was merely the prelude to an even more astonishing development. Rome, that growing power from the west, had declared war on Iria, dispatching an utterly massive force across the Adriatica staggering 22,000 men and 200 ships. Such a deployment, so far from their heartland, was simply unprecedented, a spectacle of ambition that caused a genuine stir even in a sophisticated city like Athens. That evening, the air in the tavern was thick with the scent of watered wine and the excited, speculative murmur of voices. The rough wooden table felt cool beneath your fingertips as you leaned forward, listening intently. "The Romans are fools," declared one of your companions, a merchant whose hands were perpetually stained with the rich, earthy scent of olive oil. He gestured dismissively with his cup. "They know nothing of the eastern seas. The Irians will make short work of them. You mark my words." But from across the table, an older man, a former soldier whose eyes held the weary wisdom of campaigns long past, countered slowly, "I'm not so sure. I've heard the Roman legions are formidable. They defeated Carthage, after all, didn't they?" A moment of quiet, just a fleeting pause, as the weight of that historical triumph settled upon the group. "But that was different," the merchant retorted, his voice regaining its earlier bravado. "That was their war. This isn't their territory. They don't understand our part of the world. The subtle currents and dangers." You listened, allowing their opinions to wash over you like the lukewarm wine, offering no comment of your own. Politics, you had always felt, was a treacherous game, a labyrinth best navigated only by those with the immense wealth and powerful connections to play it safely. Yet, despite your usual detachment, a vague, persistent unease began to coil in your gut. Why does this always happen so far away, yet feel so close? And wasn't that just like history? How a distant rumble can quickly turn into a tremor beneath your own feet. Barely a year later, that creeping unease proved chillingly prophetic. News, swift and decisive, arrived. The Roman campaign had been a resounding, complete success. Queen Tutotor, the proud monarch of Aria, had been forced to accept truly humiliating peace terms, ceding vast swaths of her territory and agreeing to pay tribute to Rome. Just like that, the Roman Republic now possessed a tangible foothold across the Adriatic, a presence far closer to Greece than anyone had ever imagined. For the very first time, as you considered this new reality, you couldn't help but wonder if perhaps Athens, and indeed all of Greece, ought to be paying far closer attention to this rapidly rising power in the West. The years began to stack upon each other, each one bringing subtle changes. You watched your own reflection begin to show the passage of time, your hair starting to gray softly at the temples, your back aching with a new, unwelcome persistence after a long day's work. The world around you, too, continued its relentless metamorphosis. In Macedon, Philip V ascended to the throne after the death of Antigonus, a new face on an old power. Meanwhile, whispers, like dry autumn leaves skittering across the agora, began to spread from the west. Rumors of yet another colossal conflict brewing between Rome and its ancient adversary, Carthage. Then, in the year to 18 BC, those rumors didn't just grow louder, they exploded into undeniable reality. Hannibal, that brilliant and audacious Carthaginian general, accomplished the seemingly impossible. He had led an army, complete with lumbering, exotic war elephants, across the treacherous, snow-capped peaks of the Alps, descending into Italy itself. All of Greece, from the sun-drenched islands to the rugged mainland, watched with a morbid fascination as Rome, the burgeoning titan, faced what many believed would be its ultimate existential challenge. You found yourself, perhaps surprisingly, following the news of this distant war with an intensity you wouldn't have thought possible. Each report of a Carthaginian victory, delivered by exhausted messengers and amplified by eager gossips, sent ripples of electric excitement through the taverns and public squares of Athens. It wasn't that the Athenians suddenly harbored a deep affection for Carthage, mind you. No, their delight stemmed from a far more pragmatic place. Anything that humbled the increasingly powerful and, let's be honest, rather arrogant Romans seemed like very good news indeed. Hannibal defeated them at Lake Trime. One of your friends announced excitedly one evening, his eyes wide with the sheer thrill of it all. They say the Romans lost 15,000 men, and now he's right there, in Italy itself. Added another, leaning closer. Imagine, Rome could actually fall. The prospect, the dizzying thought of Rome's utter collapse, seemed to delight everyone in the tavern. Laughter erupted, cups clattered, and a fresh wave of conversation surged through the room. Everyone, that is, except the old soldier. He remained thoughtful, stirring his wine slowly. When a lull finally fell, his voice, quiet but carrying, cut through the residual buzz. If Rome falls, he mused, what then? Do you truly believe Carthage will simply leave Greece alone if they become the dominant power in the Mediterranean? His words, sharp as flint, cast a momentary, uncomfortable pall over the boisterous celebration. But soon enough, more wine was poured, and the thought was swiftly, willfully forgotten by most. Yet, as you lay later that night on your sleeping mat, staring up at the familiar, rough-hewn ceiling beams of your modest home, the old soldier's question lingered. It echoed in the quiet chambers of your mind, a persistent whisper that chased away sleep. What you didn't know then, what no one in Athens yet knew, was that King Philip V of Macedon was asking himself precisely the same question, but reaching a vastly different and ultimately fateful conclusion. Seeing Rome suddenly vulnerable, seemingly on the brink, Philip made the momentous decision to ally himself with Hannibal, hoping to seize the moment and expand Macedonian power while Rome was tragically distracted. It was a choice that, like an arrow once loosed, could not be recalled, a decision that would inevitably bring Roman legions to Greek soil, changing everything. The seasons continued their relentless cycle, turning into years, each one marked by increasingly confused and contradictory reports filtering in from the distant west. Hannibal, for all his brilliant strategies, remained undefeated on the battlefield, yet Rome, somehow, impossibly, endured. The war dragged on, a seemingly endless, devouring maw, and gradually the collective attention in Athens, and certainly your own, turned to more immediate, pressing concerns. For you, those concerns included the ever-increasing pain in your joints, making the physical demands of your work more arduous with each passing year, and the alarming, steady rise in the cost of food at the market. You were getting by, just barely, clinging to existence with frayed fingernails. You had never married, knowing you simply couldn't afford to support a family on your meager earnings. And sometimes, in the quiet hours, the profound loneliness weighed on you as heavily as your physical discomforts. Then, one warm spring morning, as you stood at a bustling market stall, carefully selecting a handful of sun-ripened vegetables, a sudden, urgent commotion erupted at the very edge of the agora. A messenger, clearly having ridden hard and fast, his clothes sweat-soaked and his mount flecked with foam, had arrived, bringing news so significant it cut through the cacophony of vendors and shoppers. A crowd quickly gathered around him, drawn by the raw urgency in the air. You moved closer, drawn by an irresistible curiosity, despite yourself, feeling the slight jostle of bodies around you. The messenger's voice, though hoarse, carried across the marketplace with stunning clarity. Rome has defeated Carthage. Hannibal has been recalled to defend his homeland. The Roman general Scipio has invaded Africa itself. A collective murmur, a ripple of astonishment, ran through the tightly packed crowd. This was utterly unexpected news, a strategic masterstroke no one had anticipated. Despite all of Hannibal's stunning victories, all his seemingly unassailable prowess, he had been outmaneuvered. Rome, rather than crumbling under the immense pressure, had somehow found an almost miraculous strength to not only repel the invader, but to take the war directly to Carthaginian territory. "What of King Philip?" someone shouted from the back, the question cutting through the initial shock. "He allied with Carthage." The messenger's expression was grim, a stark shadow falling across his weary face. "The Romans have not forgotten." His next words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken menace. "Even now, they prepare to turn their attention eastward." A sudden, ice-cold chill traced its way down your spine, despite the gentle warmth of the spring air. Suddenly, Rome didn't seem so distant anymore. History, you realized, wasn't written in stone. It was written in footsteps like yours. And now, those footsteps felt uncomfortably close to a looming storm. The First Macedonian War, as it would later be known to scholars and scribes, ultimately concluded without much direct, devastating conflict between Roman and Macedonian forces. Rome, still deeply preoccupied with the monumental task of finally defeating Carthage, was content with a peace treaty that essentially maintained the delicate status quo, a temporary breathing space. But you, and indeed every other Greek with any shred of political awareness, knew deep in your bones that it was merely a reprieve, a fleeting moment of calm before an inevitable tempest, and truly, just 3 short years after Rome finally achieved its decisive victory over Carthage at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC, its full, formidable attention turned eastward. Conveniently, complaints from the powerful island state of Rhodes and the kingdom of Pergamon about Macedonian aggression provided the perfect pretext, the final spark needed to ignite the next, even larger conflagration. And so, just like that, the Romans finally found the pretext they'd been seeking. A delicate thread of justification to unravel peace and declare war on Philip V. This time, my friend, there would be no turning back, no cautious diplomacy. The Second Macedonian War had unfurled its grim banners across the horizon. You can feel it, can't you? That subtle shift in the air, a tension that hums beneath the surface of everyday life. You're no longer the vigorous artisan of your youth. The years have etched their wisdom onto your face, and your once nimble hands, those instruments of intricate metalworking, now bear the telltale gnarls of arthritis. The morning chill, even in the agora, often brings a twinge, reminding you of age's steady march. It's why you've taken on that earnest apprentice, a young lad whose eager strength now tackles the heavier, more demanding tasks, freeing you to focus on the finer details, the teaching. Still, the agora calls to you daily, its chaotic symphony, a comforting constant. The thrum of 1,000 conversations, the scent of roasting meats and sun-warmed olives, it all draws you in. As much for the pulse of the city and the murmur of new ideas as for the raw materials you need. And these days, every whisper, every shouted declaration, every hushed rumor, it all circles back to one formidable name, Rome. The news sweeps through the marketplace like a fresh gust of wind, carrying with it the Thames of the sea and distant lands. "They've landed at Apollonia," shouts a robust merchant, his voice thick with the aroma of the imported Italian wines he hawks, his hands gesturing wildly. You can almost taste the tartness of the Falernian he sells as he describes the scene. 20,000 legionaries, he booms, under the command of Consul Galba, their disciplined ranks already marching on Greek soil. A sun-weathered sailor, his skin smelling of salt and distant ports like Piraeus, leans in conspiratorially, adding, "The Aetolian League has thrown in their lot with Rome against Philip. Isn't that just like them?" His eyes sparkle with a mixture of cynicism and excitement. Further whispers suggest Pergamon and Rhodes. Powerful city-states in their own right have pledged their fleets to the Roman cause. You listen, quietly, your gaze perhaps fixed on a patch of sunlit dust motes dancing in the air, but your heart, my friend, sinks a little deeper with each new detail. This predictable dance of alliances and betrayals, this constant bickering that invites outside powers to mediate our internal squabbles, it's a tune Greece has known for centuries. It's how Philip II of Macedon, Alexander the Great's father, carved out his empire over a century and a half ago. History, you realize, isn't written in stone. It's written in footsteps, much like these, endlessly repeating. What of Athens? You finally ask, your voice perhaps a little hoarser than you intended, cutting through the marketplace din. Where do we stand in all of this? The question hangs in the air, a bell tolling for lost glory, momentarily silencing the nearby haggling. An uncomfortable quiet descends, broken only by the distant, rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer from deeper within the city, unnoticed by everyone but you. Athens, once the undisputed leader of the Delian League, the city whose spirit defied the mighty Persian Empire, is now, let's be honest, a mere shadow of its former self, a minor player in this vast, dangerous theater of Mediterranean power. Your beloved city has declared its allegiance to Rome, weighing Macedonian domination against Roman intervention and choosing what seems the lesser of two evils. But in your heart, you know the truth. Athens has precious little real choice, little true voice left in such matters. As the war grinds on, you piece together the fragmented reports, like assembling shards of broken pottery. A new Roman consul, Titus Quintius Flamininus, has taken command. He's different, they say. He understands the intricate, often baffling, tapestry of Greek politics and speaks our language with an almost startling fluency. He proclaims that Rome arrives not as a conqueror, but as a liberator, here to sever the chains of Macedonian oppression. Many Greeks, even some Athenians, swell with hope, believing his every word. But you, my friend, you've seen too many sunrises and sunsets, too many cycles of promises and betrayals, to be so easily swayed. You've lived long enough to be profoundly skeptical of anyone who claims to wage war for the benefit of others. Then the decisive blow, the moment that reverberated through every stone of the agora and every corner of the Greek world, arrived in 197 BCE, at a windswept place in Thessaly called Cynocephalae Dogs' Heads. Isn't that a peculiar name for destiny? There, for the first time on open ground, the formidable Roman legions clashed head-on with Philip's Macedonian phalanx. The outcome, when it finally reached you in the agora, was a shockwave. A grizzled man, his face still etched with the dust of the north, and claiming his brother had fought there, delivered the news, his voice rough with emotion, his words hanging heavy in the humid air. The phalanx, he recounted to the hushed, stunned crowd, initially drove the Romans back, a solid wall of bristling spears. But the ground, he explained, wasn't flat. It was broken, uneven terrain. And as the great phalanx moved, those crucial, fatal gaps began to open in its dense ranks. The Romans, with their shorter, deadlier swords, didn't hesitate. They poured their disciplined men into those openings, turning the very strength of the phalanx against itself. He drew a rough finger across his throat, a chilling, universal gesture. Butchery, he whispered, and the word hung heavy, thick with the smell of spilled blood you could almost imagine. 8,000 Macedonians lay dead, 5,000 more captured, Philip himself barely escaping with his life. In that moment, watching the collective realization dawn on the faces around you, you felt something fundamentally shift within the very fabric of your world. The phalanx, that indomitable Greek military formation that had dominated warfare since the days of Philip II, that had conquered an empire under Alexander, had been shattered. It was more than just a defeat. It was as if the ancient foundations of your very civilization had cracked, letting in a cold, new wind. The peace terms imposed upon Philip V were, to put it mildly, brutal. He was compelled to withdraw from every Greek territory, his once proud fleet reduced to a mere handful of symbolic vessels, and an astronomical indemnity levied against his kingdom, a debt so vast it would shackle Macedon for generations. More tellingly, he was forced to become a Roman ally, a friend of Rome, which everyone understood meant he was now effectively a client king, his throne held by Roman grace. Then, the very next year, at the hallowed Isthmian Games, imagine the roar of the crowd. The bright Hellenic sun, glinting off the athlete's oiled skin flamminess, made his grand theatrical announcement. You heard the reports echoing through the agora days later, carried by breathless travelers, of how the Roman commander proclaimed, in the name of the Senate and people of Rome, that having defeated Philip and the Macedonians, they declared various Greek peoples, including the Corinthians, Phocians, Locrians, Euboeans, Thessalians, and others, free. Free, he declared, without garrison or tribute, in full enjoyment of their ancestral laws. The jubilation, they said, was so immense, so deafening, that birds startled from their nests above the stadium were stunned by the sheer volume of noise and tumbled from the sky. Greece was free, no longer beneath the Macedonian heel. Yet you, with that deep wisdom born of countless seasons, understood what so many of your compatriots, caught in the throes of their sudden, joyous relief, could not. Freedom, when granted by another, can just as easily be reclaimed. Rome might call itself a liberator, but you knew, with a certainty that settled deep in your bones, that it had no intention of leaving the vibrant, strategic Greek world to its own devices. No, this was not the end of Roman involvement. This, my friend, was merely the prologue. Your quiet conviction, alas, proved prescient, far sooner than even your seasoned skepticism had anticipated. Barely 5 years after the battle that redefined the Greek world, another shadow loomed large over your horizon. Antiochus III, the formidable king of the Seleucid Empire, crossed into Europe with a vast army, his ambition a palpable presence that stirred the dust even in far-off Athens. Rome, now neatly positioned as the self-appointed protector of Greek liberty, did precisely what you knew it would. It dispatched its legions eastward once more, an almost casual shrug of imperial might. The Aetolian League, in a classic twist of opportunistic pragmatism, astonishingly swapped allegiances, now supporting Antiochus against their former Roman allies. They must have realized, tragically too late, that they had simply traded one master for another, a futile gesture that only hastened their own doom. At Thermopylae, that hallowed narrow pass where Leonidas and his 300 Spartans once carved their legend against the Persian tide, the Romans delivered an utterly devastating blow, crushing Antiochus and driving him reeling back into Asia. You can almost hear the clash of bronze and the Roman war cries echoing through that ancient chasm. But Rome wasn't finished. They pursued, crossing into Asia Minor, cornering Antiochus again at Magnesia in 190 BCE. and there decisively shattered his power. The Seleucid king was forced to abandon all his vast territories in Asia Minor and pay an indemnity even more crippling than Philip's. And for the Aetolians, Rome made an example of them, stripping their league of its lands and independence, reducing it to a mere Roman client state, a puppet on a string. The message to the rest of Greece was broadcast with chilling clarity. Opposition to Rome will simply not be tolerated. You watch all these monumental shifts unfold from your small corner of Athens, a keen observer from the sidelines of history. Your body, you notice, grows frailer with each passing year, a testament to the relentless march of time. The aches in your joints are a constant companion now, a low thrum beneath your skin. You rely increasingly on your diligent apprentice, his youthful vigor now shouldering most of the actual metalworking, the sweat-soaked hammering and shaping. You, in turn, supervise, guide, and teach, passing on the quiet wisdom of your craft. Your world has, in a way, contracted, shrinking to the familiar, comforting confines of your bustling workshop, your modest home, and the short, contemplative walks between them, where the air is thick with the smell of olive oil, dust, and human endeavor. It isn't quiet, but it has a rhythm of its own, a comforting pulse that keeps you grounded. Yet, despite the dwindling physicality, your mind remains remarkably sharp, a finely honed blade. You still devour every scrap of news, every rumor from the agora, diligently tracking the intricate, ever-shifting politics between Greece and the burgeoning power of Rome. You observe, with a knowing sigh, how Rome, despite its grand declarations of Greek freedom, subtly maintains its legions in strategic locations, their heavy boots a constant, unspoken presence. You notice how Roman advisors, smooth-tongued and persuasive, begin to influence the policies of supposedly independent Greek cities, their words weaving a silken web of control. And you see how Roman merchants and businessmen, you feel the invisible tendrils of Roman influence tightening, not with a clash of shields, but with the quiet rustle of trade agreements and the relentless clink of coin. It's a conquest by another name, isn't it? Slower, perhaps, but far more insidious and thorough than any legionary boot on the neck. Then, as the olive trees sway in the warm breeze of 179 BC, the news arrives. Philip V of Macedon has died, and his son, Perseus, now wears the crown. A new king, a new breath of defiance. You can almost feel his youthful impatience, his frustration with the shackles Rome has placed upon his ancient kingdom. He begins to rebuild, to gather strength, forging alliances with other Greek states, even with the wild tribes to the north in Thrace, stirring a pot Rome thought it had cooled. The air in the agora, though you no longer walk there, grows thick with whispers of Roman alarm. Their memory of Hannibal's brazen invasion, that ghost of past humiliation, still clings to them like a damp shroud, chilling their every move. The Senate, ever watchful, has no intention of allowing another potential enemy to bloom on their doorstep. Accusations, like angry hornets, buzz back and forth between Rome and Macedon. Diplomatic envoys, draped in their elaborate togas, come and go, their faces etched with the weight of unheeded warnings. Tensions escalate, coiling tighter and tighter, until, in the year 171 BC, Rome's patience snaps. The formal declaration of war against Perseus echoes across the Aegean. The Third Macedonian War has begun, and a familiar sense of dread settles over Greece. You are very old now, an elder of Athens, your own history etched onto your bones. Your hair, once dark, is now a white halo. your skin a roadmap of wrinkles, spotted with the wisdom, or perhaps just the weariness of countless seasons. Your back, permanently bent from years of study and toil, keeps you bound to your home. The bustling agora, with its vibrant debates and pungent smells of spice and sweat, is a distant memory. But friends, loyal companions, and your former apprentice now, a seasoned craftsman himself, bring you the outside world, along with bowls of rich stew and amphoras of sweet wine. The news they carry is, for a brief flicker, surprisingly hopeful. Initially, the war turns Rome's way. Perseus, a flicker of the old Macedonian fire, wins several key engagements, including a significant cavalry victory at Callinicus. For a fleeting moment, a breath of audacious hope stirs among the Greeks, a whispered dream that Macedon might somehow reassert its ancient power. Can you imagine that flicker of defiant joy, knowing what you know now? But Rome, as you've learned, is relentless. It is a force of nature. A new consul, Lucius Aemilius Paulus, takes command, bringing with him the cold, unyielding will of the Republic. Then, in 168 BC, on the sun-baked plains near Pydna, the disciplined Roman legions meet the mighty Macedonian phalanx once more. The clash is as devastating as it is decisive. The Macedonian army, a legacy of Philip II and the conqueror Alexander, is virtually annihilated. Perseus, his dreams shattered, flees, only to be captured shortly after. He will end his days a prisoner, a forgotten king languishing in some Roman dungeon across the sea. The aftermath for Macedon is a catastrophe that reshapes the world you once knew. The proud kingdom that once dominated northern Greece, the very cradle of Alexander the Great, ceases to exist as a unified state. Rome, in its cold, calculated efficiency, carves it into 4 separate republics, each forbidden even to speak to the others. A crippling tribute is imposed, and all the royal minds, the very arteries of their economy, are sealed shut. The message is brutally clear: defiance equals annihilation. As for the rest of Greece, the iron fist of Roman retribution falls hard. Any city or league merely suspected of sympathizing with Perseus faces the conqueror's wrath. 70 towns in Epirus, a land you've only seen on maps, are utterly destroyed, their stones scattered, their names erased. 150,000 people, men, women, and children, are dragged away in chains, sold into slavery. The sheer scale of it, the chilling efficiency, is almost unimaginable. Resistance, they declare, is futile. Isn't that just like history, repeating its lessons with such a heavy hand? You receive this crushing news in your bed, where the passage of time has gradually confined you. Your former apprentice, now a master craftsman, his hands roughened by years of shaping wood and stone, sits beside you. He holds your frail, spotted hand, his grip gentle as he relays the grim tidings. "What will become of Athens?" you whisper, your voice barely a rasp. "Of Greece." He squeezes your hand, a silent promise in his touch. "We will endure, master, as we always have. The Romans may claim our bodies, our lands, but they cannot take our minds, our culture. Already they send their sons here, to study with our philosophers, to gaze upon our art, to copy our architecture. In time, perhaps we will conquer them in our own way." You offer a weak, hopeful smile, wanting desperately to believe him. But as sleep, that ancient friend, begins to pull at the edges of your awareness, you can't help but wonder if Greece will ever truly breathe free again. Even in chaos, small routines, like the quiet reassurance of a friend's hand, keep you human. What you cannot know as your eyes finally close and your breath begins to slow, is that the final, most brutal act of Rome's conquest of Greece is yet to unfold. You are spared the vision of the Achaean League in its desperation, making one last, valiant, and utterly futile bid for independence. You will not witness the year 146 BC, the same year Carthage is razed to dust, when Consul Lucius Mummius, with cold Roman efficiency, defeats the Achaean army at Corinth. You will not see that beautiful city, a jewel of trade and artistry, set ablaze and leveled to the ground, its entire population condemned to the horrors of slavery. With that final, catastrophic act, all pretense of Greek freedom will vanish like smoke on the wind. Greece will officially become the Roman province of Achaea, governed directly by a Roman proconsul. But perhaps it is better this way, isn't it? Better to drift away with the illusion that something of the old Greece, the Greece of Pericles and Socrates, of democracy and philosophy, might yet survive, hidden within the Roman shadow. As sleep finally overtakes you, a profound peace settles upon your aged frame. Your muscles relax, the weight of years lifting from your tired bones. For the first time in what feels like an eternity, there is no pain, no stiffness, just a profound sense of release. Your breathing deepens, growing more rhythmic, mimicking the gentle cadence of waves lapping against the Aegean shore, a sound that has accompanied generations of Greeks to their rest. The light around you softens, then fades entirely, and you drift away, leaving behind a world in tumultuous transition, a world where Greece's golden age is drawing its final poignant breath, and Rome's ascendant era is just beginning. Two great civilizations, once distant, now inextricably entwined, and nothing, you sense, will ever be the same. History isn't written in stone. It's written in footsteps like yours, walking into the great unknown. Your eyes, perhaps not yours, but the eyes of a new self, a new generation, open to the warm, reassuring glow of morning light filtering through a small, unadorned window. You find yourself in a modest but comfortable home in Corinth, a city once synonymous with wealth and trade, now reborn. The year you instinctively know is 44 BC, exactly a century after Rome's iron grip tightened around all of Greece. Your very existence seems to straddle two vast worlds, the echoing heritage of your ancient Greek ancestors and the Roman present, which governs every breath, every decision, every aspect of your life. The rough wool of your blanket scratches a familiar pattern against your skin as you push yourself up from your sleeping pallet. Your bare feet meet the cool, smooth tiles of the floor, sending a slight shiver up your spine, despite the already warm air seeping in from outside. Beyond your walls, the city is already a vibrant symphony of awakening. You can hear the distant shouts of merchants haggling over prices, the familiar rumble of cartwheels on the cobblestone streets, the steady, rhythmic clang of hammers from the shipyards down by the bustling harbor. This Corinth, however, is not the legendary Corinth of old, not the city that inspired countless myths and legends. That metropolis, you know from stories whispered in hushed tones, was utterly annihilated by the ruthless Roman consul, Lucius Mummius. Back in 146 BC, its magnificent buildings were razed, its precious treasures plundered and carried off to Rome, its entire population brutally sold into slavery. For nearly a century, the site lay barren, a stark, empty warning of what happens to those who dared to defy Rome's inexorable will. But you were born in the new Corinth, a gleaming Roman colony founded by the formidable Julius Caesar himself, just 2 years before your arrival into this world. Your father, a pragmatic Greek from Athens, came here seeking the burgeoning opportunities that sprung from this reborn city's fertile soil. Your mother was. You trace the cool, rough, ceramic edge of the wash basin, feeling the chill of the morning air on your bare arms as you splash water onto your face. The last tendrils of sleep vanish, replaced by the sharp, invigorating reality of a new day. In your very essence, you embody the confluence of two mighty currents: Greek ingenuity and Roman power, a heritage that isn't merely a birthright, but a living bridge, defining the intricate world unfolding around you. As a scribe and translator for a Roman official, you stand precisely at that juncture, your fluency in both Greek and Latin indispensable for weaving understanding between the stern Roman administrators and the vibrant local populace. It's a position of quiet influence, placing you firmly within the colonial middle class, neither burdened by destitution nor elevated by excessive wealth, a comfortable space of belonging that is neither entirely Roman nor wholly Greek. You dress quickly, pulling on a simple tunic whose soft, local fabric, perhaps spun from Aegean cotton, feels familiar against your skin. Its cut, however, mirrors the latest fashion trends wafting in from distant Italy, a subtle blend that speaks volumes about your dual identity. Around your shoulders, a light cloak woven wool perhaps is draped, a simple shield against the lingering morning chill that promises to burn off once the sun climbs higher over the sparkling Saronic Gulf. Your sandals, worn smooth from countless journeys up and down Corinth's notoriously steep streets, are nevertheless of good quality, offering comfort and resilience for the demanding urban terrain. Before stepping out, you pause, peering into the small bronze mirror, its tarnished surface offering a faint, shimmering reflection. You see the high forehead and straight nose of your Greek father, subtly softened by the darker complexion and round chin inherited from your Italian mother. Your hair is cut short, a distinctly Roman style, a choice that, for many, is more than mere aesthetics in a world where identity feels increasingly fluid, sometimes by necessity. Stepping outside, the streets immediately envelop you in a bustling symphony of awakening. The air, though still cool, is already thick with the earthy scent of damp stone and the distant, tantalizing promise of baking bread. Corinth, perched strategically on the narrow isthmus that stitches the Peloponnese to the wider Greek mainland, hums with the rhythm of an ancient trade hub, a heartbeat that has echoed for millennia. Under Roman dominion, it has roared back to much of its former commercial glory, though now its vibrant pulse serves Rome's sprawling empire rather than Greece's scattered city-states. You weave through the morning crowd, a flowing tapestry of Roman colonists, native Greeks, and merchants from across the vast Mediterranean, offering quick nods to familiar faces. The buildings themselves tell a layered story of the city's rebirth, their Roman grandeur softened by the persistent whispers of Greek aesthetics, a column's proportion, a decorative flourisher, beautiful, if sometimes jarring, visual dialogue between conqueror and conquered. Your stomach rumbles, a sharp reminder that you left home without breaking your fast, and then a wave of sweet, yeasty warmth guides you, almost irresistibly, toward a small bakery tucked into a narrow side street. Inside, the baker, a stout Greek woman named Alara, whose family has kneaded dough in this very spot for generations, looks up, her hands dusted with flour, and greets you by name. The usual agape mo asterisk. She asks in Greek, her voice a comforting rumble, already reaching for a small, golden loaf. It's her specialty, a wheat bread sweetened with honey and studded with succulent dried figs, a taste that tells a story of sun-drenched orchards and ancient traditions. "Please," you reply, "and some cheese, if you have it." She deftly wraps the bread in a clean scrap of linen, adding a small wedge of crumbly goat cheese, accepting your coins with a knowing smile. Then, leaning in, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and trepidation, she whispers, "Did you hear the news?" "What news?" you ask, a casual question that seems impossibly distant now. "Alara, you know, is as famous for her potent gossip as for her perfect loaves. And while you often take her more outlandish tales with a grain of salt, she has a knack for knowing things before they ripple through the official channels. They say, Caesar has been murdered," she breathes, the words barely audible above the gentle crackle of the oven. "In Rome, stabbed in the Senate house, by his own friends." Your hand, halfway to your mouth, with a piece of the fig-studded bread, freezes. The delicate pastry, now forgotten, suddenly feels heavy and cold. "Caesar, dead, are you certain?" She nods vigorously, her face etched with disbelief. "A merchant ship arrived last night from Brundisium. The captain told my cousin's husband, who works the docks. They say it happened on the Ides of March." Your mind begins to race, a frantic torrent of images and implications. Julius Caesar, the formidable conqueror of Gaul, the triumphant victor of Rome's brutal civil war, the man who dared to declare himself dictator for life, and, perhaps most pertinently, the very founder of this revitalized colony where you now stand assassinated by his fellow Romans. The sheer audacity, the terrifying implications. If this whispered truth holds, it is a momentous, earth-shattering event that will not merely ripple, but crash across the entire Mediterranean world, inevitably engulfing even your tranquil corner of it. "I should go," you manage, your voice sounding strangely thin in your own ears, as you quickly tuck the precious bread and cheese into your satchel. "Thank you for telling me, Ilara." As you step back into the now louder, more insistent currents of the street, you begin to notice the shift. The casual chatter has given way to hushed, worried conversations. Small groups of people are huddled together, their expressions tight with apprehension, their gestures quick and uncertain. It seems Ilara's grapevine wasn't the only one carrying this poison fruit. Roman citizens, in particular, look visibly shaken, their customary confidence replaced by a palpable fear. Their very status, their security, their future in this distant colony, after all, hinges entirely on the unwavering stability of Rome itself. The grand, imposing facade of the governmental complex soon looms into view, its Roman-style architecture softened by subtle Greek details, a deliberate blend, you know, meant to make it less alien, less threatening to local eyes. This architectural embrace is a calculated strategy. Rome has learned that outright suppression breeds only resentment, while selective adoption and adaptation foster a far more enduring acceptance. History, you reflect, isn't written in stone. It's written in footsteps like yours, in the shifting sands of imperial policy, and in the choices made in the shadow of power. Inside, the usual ordered calm of the administrative offices has fractured, replaced by a barely controlled chaos. The air, typically thick with the scent of aged papyrus and the rhythmic scratch of countless quills, now vibrates with a frantic energy. Officials, their faces strained, hurry from room to room. Important-looking documents, clutched like lifelines in their hands. Clerks and scribes, like yourself, have abandoned their ledgers and scrolls, standing in hushed, anxious clusters, their work forgotten as they dissect the swirling rumors. You spot your supervisor, Gaius Septimus, a middle-aged Roman from central Italy, who has presided over these offices for a decade, his gaze sweeping the entrance with an almost desperate urgency. When his eyes lock with yours, he beckons you over with a sharp, insistent gesture. "There you are," he says in Latin, his voice low, intense, almost a growl. "You've heard, I assume, about Caesar," you ask, your voice remarkably steady despite the tremor in your stomach. "Yes, just now in the market, is it?" Confirmed. He nods grimly, the slight movement of his head heavy with foreboding. "Official word arrived by special courier an hour ago. Caesar is dead, stabbed 23 times by a group of senators, led by Brutus and Cassius." He runs a hand through his thinning hair, a gesture of profound weariness. "Gods, what a mess. The whole republic could collapse into civil war again. Why does this always happen to us?" The chilling implications of his words settle deep within you, heavy and cold. You remember the stories your father used to tell, whispered at supper, of the last Roman civil war, how its bloody tide had spilled over into Greece, dragging armies from both sides across sacred lands, ravaging everything in their path. Battles near Thessalonica and Athens. The Athenians had chosen poorly, backing Pompey against Caesar, and had suffered for it, though their ancient city had been spared outright destruction. "What happens now?" you ask, your voice still holding steady, a small anchor in the rising tide of unease. "That's what we're trying to determine," Septimius replies, his voice a low, steady rumble that somehow cuts through the office's usual hum of hushed whispers and scratching quills. "For now, we maintain order and continue our duties. Rome endures, with or without Caesar." He smooths the folds of his toga, a familiar, almost unconscious gesture, like the rustle of dry leaves, designed to project an unshakable authority that seems to vibrate just beneath his skin. Then, his gaze fixing on yours, he adds, "I need you to translate an announcement for the Greek population. It must be posted in the agora by midday." You nod, the weight of the moment pressing down, accepting the smooth, cool tablet he extends. The Latin text is brief, carved with deliberate precision, carefully acknowledging Caesar's death, while simultaneously, almost defiantly, emphasizing that Roman authority across the province remains utterly unchanged. There is, notably, no mention of who might succeed the dictator, nor any hint of the political maelstrom surely brewing in Rome itself. As you settle at your familiar desk, the cool stone beneath your forearms a grounding presence, you pick up your stylus. The faint, earthy scent of parchment and ink already permeates the air, a constant companion in this world of words. Your task, to craft a Greek translation that not only captures the exact letter of the announcement, but also its underlying spirit, a delicate balance, you think, between reassurance and implied command. Yet, even as your mind begins to parse the Latin phrases, your thoughts drift, pulled by the much larger, unsettling questions ignited by Caesar's assassination. You've lived your entire life, much like your parents before you, in a world utterly dominated by Rome. The very notion of Greek independence, something your grandparents might have dimly recalled from their youth, feels like a story from the age of myths now, ancient history, complex. And yet, beneath that visible Roman veneer, Greek culture has not merely survived. It has, in its own quiet, resilient way, thrived. The Romans, with their legions and their laws, may have conquered Greece militarily and politically, but they, in turn, were utterly captivated by its art, its literature, its philosophy, and its revolutionary science. As the poet Horace so famously observed, a captured Greece, indeed, captured her fierce conqueror. You witness this cultural exchange daily in your work as a translator, a fascinating dance of ideas and aesthetics. Roman officials, with a newfound intellectual hunger, eagerly study Greek philosophy, sending their own children across the sea to be educated by Greek tutors, Greek architects and artists. Their hands, still shaping beauty from stone and pigment, find eager patrons among the wealthiest Roman families. Even the very religions have begun to subtly intertwine, a slow, organic blending where Roman gods are increasingly identified with their venerable Greek counterparts. Jupiter with mighty Zeus, Mars with fierce Ares, Venus with the divine Aphrodite. Isn't that just like history, absorbing and transforming everything in its path? Your translation, a carefully balanced tapestry of ancient words and modern intent, is finally complete. You hand the tablet to a waiting clerk, whose quill scratches with a brisk rhythmic sound as he begins the laborious process of copying it onto the official announcement boards. Then, at Septimius's direction, your morning continues, a monotonous yet crucial cascade of administrative tasks. You spend the remaining hours drafting letters to minor officials scattered throughout outlying villages, informing them of Caesar's death, and, more importantly, reiterating the firm instruction to maintain absolute order. By midday, your hand aches with a deep, persistent throb, the muscles cramped from hours of precise, unceasing writing. Septimius, ever the pragmatic observer, catches your discomfort. Enough, he says, a wave of his hand dismissing you. Take an hour. Clear your head, but don't go far. We may need you this afternoon, if there are any developments. The word hangs in the air, thick with unspoken possibilities. Grateful for the respite, you step out of the dim, dusty confines of the office and into the brilliant, almost blinding sunlight of a Corinthian spring day. The main forum, usually a bustling symphony of voices and footsteps, is now truly crowded. People mill around the announcement boards, a silent, watchful throng gathered where your translation has just been posted. The air is thick with a low, nervous murmur, a sound like a distant swarm of bees, tense but not yet panicked. Corinth, let's be honest, has prospered remarkably under Roman rule. While few here would have personally grieved Caesar, stability, after all, is undeniably good for business. You find a small wine shop, its weathered wooden facade hinting at generations of commerce, with a perfect view of the forum. Sliding onto a low stool, you order a cup of watered wine, the common man's drink, and a small plate of plump, briny olives to accompany the bread and cheese you brought from home. The shopkeeper, a man whose face is as creased as a dried fig, recognizes you. A familiar face from the administration. Troubling news, isn't it? He comments, his voice hushed as he pours your wine, a small stream of purple liquid, into the earthenware cup. He even offers a small, unexpected discount, a gesture that speaks volumes of the day's unease. What do you think will happen now? Your mind races, weighing your words carefully. As an employee of the government, your opinions carry a certain weight, a subtle authority. And in these uncertain times, careless talk can be dangerous. A spark in a tinderbox. Rome has weathered crisis before, you say, the words rolling off your tongue with practiced diplomacy, the taste of the bland wine, a distraction from the lie. The Republic will continue, but even as you speak, the warmth of the sun on your face, a cold dread coils in your stomach. Is that truly what you believe? Caesar had been relentlessly consolidating power, accumulating titles and honors, completely unprecedented in Roman history. Whispers, like the dry rustle of papyrus leaves, spoke of a man intent on making himself king, a title utterly detested in the Republic since the monarchy's violent overthrow 5 centuries ago was his assassination. Then, a desperate, final defense of Republican values, as the killers would no doubt claim. Or was it merely another brutal power play, a bloody maneuver in Rome's increasingly factional politics, a chaotic jumble of ambition and betrayal? And what of Mark Antony, Caesar's fiercely loyal lieutenant, or Octavian, his young grandnephew and adopted son? They would surely seek vengeance against the conspirators, a furious wave crashing against the shores of stability. The pieces, you realize with a sickening certainty, are already in place for another catastrophic civil war, and Greece, your home, beautiful and vulnerable, lies directly between Rome and the eastern provinces, precisely where Brutus and Cassius have fled. Your dark reflections are abruptly shattered by a sudden commotion in the Forum, a sharp jolt back to the immediate reality of Corinth. A centurion, his polished bronze armor glinting like a distant beacon in the afternoon sun from the small garrison that maintains order here, steps forward, his voice booming, amplified by the open space. Citizens of Rome, allies, and provincials. He calls out, his Greek accented but perfectly understandable, a harsh, clipped cadence. Be assured that the peace and security of Corinth remains our highest priority. The words echo off the ancient stone, a stark reminder of military presence. All garrison troops are on alert. The night curfew will be strictly enforced until further notice. Anyone spreading disorder or rebellion will be dealt with harshly. The crowd receives this announcement not with protests, but with murmurs, a low, acquiescent rumble. Most people here, Greek and Roman alike, value the Pax Romana, the Roman peace that has brought an undeniable prosperity to this region after centuries of petty, bloody warfare between rival Greek states. You finish your meal quickly, the watered wine now tasting strangely bitter, and return to the administrative complex, the centurion's words still ringing in your ears. As you expected, the afternoon dissolves into a relentless deluge of additional correspondence and translations. The hours blur into a rhythmic symphony of scratching quills and the rustle of papyrus, the air growing thick with the scent of lamp oil not yet lit. Sunset finds you still at your desk, your eyes strained and burning from hours of detailed work, squinting in the increasingly inadequate light filtering through the high windows. Enough, Septimius says at last, his voice softer now, noticing the weary slump of your shoulders. Go home, rest. Tomorrow will be another long day. The words are a gentle dismissal, yet you know they carry the weight of an unspoken prediction. The streets are noticeably quieter than usual as you make your way home, the normal evening bustle subdued, almost muted, by the day's uncertainty and the enhanced military presence. Torches at major intersections flicker with an eerie intensity, casting restless, dancing light and long, unsettling shadows that seem to stretch and twist like silent specters. Roman soldiers patrol in pairs, their heavy boots clanking against the cobblestones, armor glinting ominously in the torchlight, hands resting casually, almost proprietarily, on the hilts of their swords. You reach your modest home without incident, the familiar comfort a welcome balm. Inside, you light a small oil lamp, its gentle, golden glow pushing back the creeping darkness, filling the single room with warm light and the faint, familiar scent of olive oil. The day's events have left you mentally exhausted, your mind a tangled knot of facts and fears. Yet, despite the fatigue, your thoughts continue to churn, a relentless mill of questions about what might lie ahead. A sharp, unexpected rap at your door startles you, pulling you abruptly from your troubled introspection. Cautiously, your heart thumping a frantic rhythm, you open it to find Timus, a childhood friend whose quick wit now serves him well as a merchant's assistant specializing in the lucrative wine trade between Greece and Italy. "May I come in?" he asks, his gaze darting nervously over his shoulder at the empty, silent street. You step aside, admitting him, the cool night air following him in. Curious about this unexpected visit, the air in your small chamber, thick with the scent of a recent meal, perhaps roasted lamb, or the lingering sweetness of figs. Timus, usually a beacon of cheer and easy laughter, now stands before you, his brow furrowed, his movements surprisingly tense. His usual openness is replaced by a quiet intensity that prickles your skin, like the first hint of a storm on the horizon. "Have you heard anything more?" he asks, cutting straight to the chase, his gaze unwavering about what's happening in Rome. You reach for your clay pitcher, cool and rough beneath your fingers, and pour him a cup of fresh water. A distant dog barks, its sound echoing through the narrow, winding streets of Corinth, yet unheard by Timus. "Nothing beyond the official announcement, I'm afraid," you reply, your voice a calm counterpoint to his agitation. "Caesar is dead, killed by conspirators like Brutus and Cassius. The government, they say, continues to function. That's all we know for certain, for now anyway." Timus takes the cup, but it remains untouched in his hand, his eyes fixed on some unseen point beyond the sun-baked walls of your room, which whisper tales of generations lived and died in this very spot. "There's talk in the merchant quarter," he confides, his voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper. "Even though you're alone, the privacy of your home wrapping around you like a familiar cloak, you can almost feel the vibrations of distant haggling and the clang of copper coins from the bustling agora making their way through the very stone beneath your feet. Some say this could be an opportunity. An opportunity." Your spine stiffens imperceptibly, a cold ripple of unease tracing its way upwards. You manage to keep your tone neutral, though a practiced habit in these uncertain times. "An opportunity for what, Timus?" you ask, the words soft, almost a breath. His eyes, usually so full of warmth, now burn with an almost revolutionary fire, meeting yours directly. "For Greece," he states, the word a stark declaration. "For independence." He leans in slightly, as if afraid the very air might carry his dangerous words beyond your threshold. "If Rome falls into civil war again, their grip on the provinces, it will weaken. This could be our chance to reclaim what was lost a century ago when Mummius razed the old city." You stare at him, momentarily speechless, the concept so utterly foreign to your world that your mind struggles to even grasp it, like trying to recall a dream you've barely woken from. Independence from Rome. It seems as outlandish as reverting to bronze weapons or abandoning the elegant Olympian gods for the chaotic, long-forgotten Titans. Isn't that just like history, though? Always throwing you a That's dangerous talk, Timus. You finally manage, the words tasting like ash in your mouth. And frankly, it's unrealistic. Greece has been Roman for generations. We don't even know how to be independent anymore. The very fabric of your life, the subtle rhythm of the city, hums with this blended identity. Yet, he counters immediately, his frustration bubbling closer to the surface. Our ancestors did. The blood of free Greeks still flows in our veins. Don't tell me you've never imagined what it would be like if we governed ourselves again, if we didn't send our wealth to Rome as taxes, if we didn't have to bow to their proconsuls and praetors. A valid point, you have to admit. In truth, you have occasionally indulged in such fantasies, especially when reading the ancient histories of Athens and Sparta in their glory days. The words themselves imbued with the scent of parchment and ages past. The echoes of triumphant speeches and glorious battles, though, were just that, fantasies. They were as disconnected from your real life, from the faint scent of Roman incense wafting from the nearby temple, as the myths of gods and heroes. The world has changed, Timus, you say gently, your hand resting briefly on his arm, a gesture of quiet caution. Rome isn't just our conqueror anymore. It's part of who we are now. Look at me, I'm half Italian. Look at Corinth, a Roman colony built on Greek soil. We can't simply turn back time, can we? So, we accept our chains because they're familiar. His voice rises slightly, frustration now clearly evident, stirring a brief chorus of chirping cicadas outside your window, because they're comfortable. Our great-grandparents fought against Roman rule. You know, they died for Greek freedom. The very walls seem to absorb his words, silently witnessing another generational debate, and they lost. You remind him, the memory a bitter taste, brutally. Remember what happened to the original Corinth. It was destroyed so thoroughly that nothing remained but ashes. Would you risk that again? Would you risk seeing this new Corinth, thriving under Roman patronage, brought to its knees? You can almost smell the smoke, feel the heat of that ancient destruction. The conversation continues in this vein for some time, neither of you truly convincing the other, the unspoken tension hanging between you like the humid summer air. Finally, Timus rises to leave, the untouched cup of water still full on your small table, a symbol of the unquenched thirst for an impossible freedom. Just think about it, he says at the door, his gaze lingering, intense, before he steps back into the fading twilight. Things are changing. We should be ready. After he's gone, the quiet hum of the city seems to press in on you, now feeling less comforting, more like a stifling weight. You sink onto your sleeping mat, troubled by the encounter, the cool rush of air from the open door, doing little to calm your stirred thoughts. Could Timus be right? Is there genuine sentiment for Greek independence simmering beneath the placid surface of Roman provincial life? And if so, what would happen if it boiled over in the uncertainty following Caesar's death? More personally, where would you stand in such a conflict? Your job, your position in society, your very identity, all built around the complex Roman-Greek synthesis that Timus seems so ready to tear apart. Yet, you are still Greek in many ways, aren't you? In your language, in your understanding of the world, in your deep connection to this land that was ancient when Rome was still a mere village on the Tiber. History isn't written in stone. It's written in footsteps, like yours. After all, sleep comes slowly that night, each turn on your mat accompanied by the creak of the old wood, and when it finally arrives, your dreams are troubled by shadowy figures in togas and warriors in bronze armor, battling across landscapes that shift between the Rome you've never seen and the Greece you know. You wake at dawn, your body tense, the rough texture of your linen tunic a familiar discomfort. Your mind still grappling with the weighty questions Timus's visit had raised. But the practical concerns of daily life soon assert themselves. You must work, you must eat, you must navigate the complex reality of your world, rather than debate hypothetical futures. Even in chaos, Small routines keep you human, don't they? The next several weeks pass in a blur of activity, each day flowing into the next like a slow-moving river. News from Rome arrives in fragmented pieces, sometimes contradictory, carried by weary sailors and nervous merchants. Mark Antony has taken control. No, Octavian has raised an army. The Senate has granted amnesty to Caesar's killers. No, they've been declared public enemies. The situation seems to change with each ship that docks in the bustling harbor, the salt air thick with rumor and speculation. In Corinth itself, life continues with only minor disruptions, the rhythm of commerce and daily toil unbroken. The Roman authorities maintain a heightened military presence. You see more legionaries patrolling, their hobnailed boots clattering on the paving stones, and travel to and from the city is more closely monitored. There are occasional arrests of individuals suspected of fomenting unrest, their faces grim as they're led away, though most are released after questioning, returning to their shops and homes with a newfound quietness in their eyes. You see Timus only in passing during this period, usually in the agora, the cacophony of vendors and shoppers forming a natural barrier. Your conversations are limited to brief public exchanges, polite and carefully neutral. Whether he is continuing to explore ideas of Greek independence, you don't know, and part of you honestly prefers it that way. Your position in the administration makes any association with potential rebellion dangerously risky, not just to yourself, but to him as well. The very ground beneath your feet feels a little less stable, a little more uncertain. Then, nearly 2 months after Caesar's death, definitive news arrives from Rome, carried by a swift galley, its sails taut against the Aegean wind. The second triumvirate has been formed, a formidable alliance between Mark Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus, pooling their vast resources and authority to hunt down Caesar's assassins and restore order. Their order to the Republic. Their first act is a series of prescriptions, terrifying death lists targeting not only those directly involved in Caesar's murder, but also political opponents and individuals whose vast wealth could fund the triumvir's growing armies. Hundreds of Roman senators and equities are executed, their properties confiscated, their names wiped from the public record as if they never existed. The news sends shockwaves through Corinth's Roman community, their usual confident swagger replaced by a nervous agitation. Many have relatives or patrons in Rome who might be affected by this brutal purge. Some fear that the proscriptions might extend to the provinces, targeting those with known Republican sympathies. You can almost taste the fear in the air. For the Greek population, however, the news is received with more detachment, a grim acknowledgement of Roman political bloodletting. It's concerning, certainly, primarily for its potential impact on local stability and commerce, on the smooth flow of goods and taxes. But few Greeks mourn the deaths of Roman elites they never knew, never cared for. Why should they? Their connection was to this land, this city, not the distant machinations of Rome, but the very next ship from Italy brings news that affects everyone, a decree that cuts across all lines, Roman and Greek alike. Brutus. As if the chaos weren't enough, Brutus and Cassius, those defiant senators, had slipped away, vanishing into the eastern provinces to rally their own formidable forces. And you knew, deep in your bones, what that meant for this land you called home, this sun-drenched, dust-kissed peninsula. Greece, positioned like a sacrificial lamb between Rome and the rising sun, was destined to become a battlefield once more. caught in the relentless grind of imperial ambition. The air, usually thick with the briny scent of the Gulf of Corinth and the distant chatter of dockworkers, now felt heavy with an unspoken dread, a suffocating premonition that wrapped around you like a shroud. You felt the cool, smooth marble under your sandals as your supervisor's summons pulled you, along with every other staff member, into the echoing grandeur of the administrative complex's atrium. The air wasn't quiet, no, but it had a strange, reverent rhythm of its own, a hushed anticipation that settled over the murmuring crowd. Septimus, his face a mask of solemn gravity, stood before you, his voice, usually so clipped and precise, now amplified and slightly distorted as it bounced off the colossal fluted columns that soared towards a distant, painted ceiling. These walls, ancient even in their Roman newness, whispered of endless cycles of conquest and adaptation, a history lessons you felt deep in your bones. "We have received instructions from Rome," Septimus announced, his words hanging in the vast space, carrying the weight of the empire itself. "The province is to prepare for the arrival of troops loyal to the triumvirs." A collective intake of breath, a subtle shift in the crowd, a rustle of togas. "Supplies," he continued, "must be stockpiled with brutal efficiency. Roads, already worn by constant traffic, needed meticulous maintenance. Harbor facilities, crucial arteries of trade, were to be made ready for warships and transports. This, you understood, meant an additional burden, unavoidable taxation, and grueling labor obligations for every community, every farmer, every artisan in Greece. It wasn't just a request. It was an imperial decree delivered with the quiet, chilling finality of a death sentence. A low murmur rippled through the assembled staff, a shared understanding settling like a pall. It was the same old song, wasn't it? The cost of Rome's endless internal strife always landed squarely on the provinces. Greek farmers would become the unwitting providers for Roman soldiers, their harvests siphoned off. Greek laborers, their muscles aching, would erect Roman fortifications, protecting their oppressors. Greek merchants would watch helplessly as their vibrant overseas trade routes dissolved into naval maneuvers and blockades, their entrepreneurial spirit stifled by distant wars. Somewhere in the distance, a hammer struck stone, a soft, repetitive asterisk thunk, asterisk that echoed the endless, unnoticed rhythm of construction and construction.